Hello, Patreons. We are back with the Facts of Geek Life, which it's been a while since we've been on. This is airing a little bit later than when we recorded it because Facts of Geek Life has kind of been supplanted by all of these great interviews that we're doing, and there's more to come, or you've heard them by the time you've heard this. But regardless, this is one that I've had on the docket for a while. I'm joined by my lovely wife, April, her first appearance on this show, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So we are talking, we're doing a different little format as well. We're doing kind of a listicle, which a lot of people hate those, but in a lot of cases, I think particularly for what we're going to talk about here, it makes a lot of sense because we're talking about a long running show that was super interconnected. And if we wanted to break out and do it individually, it could take the better part of a decade. So I am talking about one of my favorite programs, which I've talked about many, many times on our main show, which is Fox's 24 from the early 2000s. So just to break it down, you've probably heard of the show. Other than what we're going to talk about, it might not make a lot of ton of sense, but we're going to try to have fun with it. But Fox's 24 American action drama series, created by Joel Surnow and Robert Cochran for Fox. Ensemble cast led by the fantastical Kiefer Sutherland, Special K, as he's sometimes referred to as, starring as American counter-terrorist federal agent Jack Bauer, one of the biggest badasses you'll ever see, in my opinion, and just this shy of superhuman powers. He was the predecessor to Alan Ritchson's Jack Reacher, if you're familiar with that program, because not much seems to kill him, even though he should be dead every other minute. The format was unique at the time, though I think it's kind of proliferated in this way, but every season covers 24 consecutive hours. The first season, they started out doing midnight to midnight, and then through the subsequent seasons, they would start at different times of the day or whatever it is. So 24 consecutive hours using a real-time format emphasized by the display of split screens and a digital clock. And April watched this with me for the first time last year. Because it's all on Amazon Prime as of 2024, which is when we plan this. I'm assuming that's the case, but always use justwatch.tv. That's the website that we all use to keep track of where you can stream things, because that's going to be the easiest way to find it. But that's probably still the case. Although, because it was on Fox, maybe it'll end up on Disney. Wouldn't that be charming? You can watch it on Disney Plus with your kids. You think?
Yes. Yes.
But yeah, so it was on for, my God, 204 episodes between November 6th of 2001. And I will never forget the first episode, contained a terrorist bombing of an airliner, only a couple of months after 9/11. So they kept it, but it was they did not show the plane exploding. They showed what had happened was a passenger who was a terrorist managed to blow out the emergency door and leave the plane. You simply saw her fall and then fall in her suit, and then the parachute engages, but you do not see the plane explode for obvious reasons. So, but it obviously was not that way when they filmed it. So the series ran 204 episodes all the way to July of 2014. So the show was on for almost 15 years, which is crazy. On and off, there was a writer's strike in there. There was an additional TV film called Redemption, which is on between season 6 and 7. It was a setup to season 7. In 2008, and again was made by 20th Century Fox and Imagine Television. So what we're doing today is and again, this is our first attempt to do something like this, but because the series is so massive and in a lot of ways very impossible to split up, we have, I sought out a listicle off of Screen Rant, which I know a lot of people are kind of down on listicles for whatever reasons, and I'm not singling out Screen Rant in particular, but I thought a listicle made a lot of sense for this particular track. So this is 5 best and 5 worst episodes, and we're going to kind of paint a picture around this. And I thought it made sense that since we watched it last year, and we pushed back recording this a bunch of different times, but I didn't want it to go too long, so that while I've seen the series more than once, April's just seen it the one time, so I didn't want it to be like, oh, I don't really remember that, which would totally make sense if you've seen something so massive just the one time. So I'm going to kick it off with the first of the worst segments. This is coming from day 8, so season 8, from the hour from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Yes, it's duly noted in this that none of the lesser 24 episodes have bad IMDb scores. But when the show is operating slow, it's still pretty effective, but they tend to just go really way off here. And in this season, in this moment, an associate of Jack's from the previous season, who was an FBI agent who went off the rails, her name is Renee, comes back in this season as kind of a broken woman, but she has to reintegrate herself into the Russian mob. And so Jack doesn't want her to do it, and there's a lot of sexual tension. But this is the one, if I'm not mistaken, where she ends up having to saw off a guy's fingers or something in order to get a tracker off him or something. It's just extraordinarily gratuitous. So you remember what I'm talking about here?
Yes, I think so.
So yeah, the series really flourishes when, you know, it's suspenseful and misdirect, but in this episode in particular, there wasn't a lot of it. It was just kind of gore, which just it just doesn't really swing the bill. So yeah, she tortured this dude, and then I know in other parts of it, she ends up with the main Russian mobster, who's the same guy who was Leoben in Battlestar Galactica, that Callum Keith Rennie, who was also in Star Trek Discovery, the final season, and that he's beating the crap out of her, and then she just finally snaps and shoots him or chops his arm off. Something. It's just very gruesome. So like a lot of shows, kind of when they get to the end of it, it's just kind of tricks or like, hey, we've run out of things to talk about, and that's really kind of what season 8 as a whole felt like. Any particular thoughts of that whole time frame that come to mind for you?
I just remember that I found her really annoying. That's what I remember.
Yeah. Well, it was such a paradigm shift between the
was.
previous season, where she was this like very tough,
Right.
I don't break the rules kind of FBI agent. Like she deplored Jack for his, because that whole season was about him being on trial for crimes against humanity in the course of his work. And she's like, well, I would never do any of the things you do. But at the end of it,
and
she's closed doors with the series, with the villain of the season was played by actor Will Patton, and the door closes, and then they say, well, she quit the FBI after she beat the shit out of that guy and almost killed him. And I'm like, whoa. And then she comes back and she's just totally unhinged. So it's
a
just
completely different personality.
Yeah. So I just didn't really appreciate that so much. So, okay. So that's a bad moment. Here's a great moment. Day 5, season 5. 24 went through all of your typical, there's a bomb, there's a nuclear something, there's a virus. We had a couple of nuclear rods was one of them. That was, I think, the season 8 that we were talking about. But season 5 was a virus, and it was a corrupt president. In the form of the late, and I'm going to forget the actor's name, but it was President Logan, played by an absolutely great actor that left us fairly recently. So I'm going to draw a blank, and if I'm smart enough, I'll put it in the notes. Greg Eitzen is his name. Greg Eitzen. You've seen him in tons of stuff. But this was one where, in this episode being highlighted, is the episode 6 p.m. to 7 p.m., where all of our heroes are trapped back in CTU, which is their office complex headquarters, where the villains who are perpetrating this nerve gas have managed to get an agent inside and secretly plant it in the ventilation system. And fortunately, CTU, the counterterrorist unit, can lock down the building, and there are safe zones, and everybody, while some people die while our heroes are rushing, like all of our people end up in the conference room, I think it is. And at the last moment, when the door is sealed and they're out of time, a beloved character who is Edgar, a heavyset computer tech, very socially awkward, wanders around the corner, and he's locking eyes with the character of Chloe, who's played by Mary Lynn Rice Cub, who is a Michigan native, by the way, and a wonderful comedian who you've seen in a lot of different stuff. But they were always kind of frenemies in this show. But ultimately, he says Chloe, and then he drops from this gas, and it kills him. Wow. And that happened when somebody dies in 24 with some really impactful death, generally will happen at the exact last seconds, and then you'll get what they call a silent clock. So you'll see the normal clocking instead of hearing the kerchunk, kerchunk, kerchunk. It'll just be the count out. So seeing this moment for the first time, how were you feeling?
It was so sad. I really liked Edgar. He was so innocent. Um, yeah. And it was devastating to have that happen, and everybody could watch it because they were like the big glass
Right, and nothing to
office.
be done.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they had
They
the
couldn't help it.
seal was that, yeah, once it was sealed, you know, it's the classic, once it's sealed, you can't do anything about it. So yeah, it was a heartbreaker.
Yeah.
That was tough. But I think that underscores one of the things that's really great about the shows, which I'm sure the number one moment will be the moment that I'm thinking of from season one, but we will see. Because we're doing this, we're kind of tackling this and just kind of giving you our raw feelings as we go through it. But a worst moment. All right, so here's our next worst moment. Day 7, which was the previous season to what we were talking about with Renee when she was the virtuous FBI agent, had to do with the return of Carlos Bernard's character of Tony Almeida, who was a core character in the first 3 seasons of the show. And this turned into kind of misdirect central. So they had the whole thing where Tony had it turned very soap opera. We thought he
What?
had died in season 4 because he got poisoned, but then he showed up as being alive, and it was several years later, and he had been undercover with a group of bad guys so that he can infiltrate their blah 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 and this and that. And we go all the way through this season. So I mean, and we're pretty close to the end here because I think this is one of the seasons that ended. This was maybe 3/4 of the way through the season, or not quite. But it's revealed at the last moment that Tony is really a villain all along, but he's not with the villainous people. He's there because he wants to kill Will Patton, who I already mentioned is the one who ends up in the interrogation room at the end of the season with virtuous Renee before she snaps, because he's the mastermind behind everything that's ever happened that led to Tony getting blown, or his wife getting blown up, and his wife was also pregnant, which was never revealed. Because remember at the beginning of season, it was at the beginning of season 5, when Jack had faked his own
Right.
death at the end of season 4, but then he had to come back. But there was a situation, and even though Tony and Michelle, who is his wife, had retired, they were going to go in and help. And she goes to start the car, and she blows up. Well, it turns out Will Patton was behind all of it, and he was behind bad President Logan. So it's just like, I mean, and again, this is season 7 of 9, so they're like, let's see what else we can just find a way to
Yeah.
tack on.
What else can happen in this 24-hour period? Because everything has to happen in
Exactly.
this 24-hour period.
Right. Yeah, exactly correct. So yeah, so we found out that he was lying the whole time, and really he's after revenge because this thing and that thing. The guy who poisoned him in season 4 was working for Will Patton, and again, remember that because that was Peter Weller. You remember Peter Weller? That was
Yes.
season what did I say, season 5, right? So that was season 5. Peter Weller was the villain there. He was Jack's mentor, and he got all this crazy torture, but he survived it. And then at the last moment he woke up and stuck a needle in Tony, which was actually just a knockout serum, because somebody behind the scenes, it was too much. It was way too much for anybody to possibly believe could happen. So yeah, it was everything in this day it was all what they call what's the expression I'm thinking of? It was all retconned, because it's like, well, it was really so and so and did this thing and that thing, and nobody was ever pulling the strings until this Will Patton guy. But then he was kind of dispensed with off screen. You don't know if he died or whatever, but you never heard about him again. He got the one name drop after you see Renee and she's all squirrely whirly. Okay, shocking, terrible moments. Dave, we were already talking about day 5. First episode of that season was 7 a.m. So 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Most shocking opening of the entire series. In season 1, we had several, characters that move forward and later in the show, but the 2 core characters were Jack Bauer and then Senator David Palmer, who at the end, he's running for presidential campaign. We find out in season 2 that he wins. But he jumps through a lot of hoops. He doesn't run for re-election at the end of season 3 because he's so distraught by stuff he had to do to save the day from that crisis. And so we don't see in season 4, he steps in to help out Charles Logan, because that president dies or is incapacitated. So 25th Amendment, that comes up a lot in this 25th Amendment. Could use some of that right now. That'd be great. But I digress. So at any rate, now The president is a private citizen. His brother is played by DB Woodside, actor DB Woodside, who was he was one of the Temptations in that great The Temptations TV movie that I loved in the 90s. He was the bass singer. And has been in tons of other stuff. But in this, he's the brother of David Palmer. They're in DB Woodside. Wayne Palmer is his name. They're in Wayne's LA downtown high-rise apartment. They're taking notes for David's memoirs. It's at 7:00 in the morning. I guess they've been up all night. And David's just standing there kind of gazing into the distance, and a sniper bullet bashes through the window and kills him. Just never would have seen it coming. This was a great show that, and maybe because it was so nascent in what we deal with now with the show, that you catch spoilers way in advance. Oh, so-and-so is going to be a cast member of this, so they're back from the dead. But this, I remember, because again, I watched this show from when it came on to when it went off, and I know that you saw it in bits and pieces here and there early on, but you hadn't really seen any of the rest of it until we had watched it. So, yeah. So, how'd that make you feel?
I really liked him. So that was a hard death. Like, Edgar was sad because Chloe, but David Palmer was the president, everybody wants to see.
He is. He was Obama before we had Obama.
Yeah, exactly.
If you were going to look at it that way. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I did read a tidbit for this episode that because there was an NFL playoff game that in some places that it aired 15 minutes late. I'm just curious how far into the show that the assassination happened, and if...
I'm telling you, it was within the first 5 minutes.
That would have really sucked. So
okay.
It was preempted by an NFL game on the East Coast. So if you were watching it live...
I did not know that. Wow, look at you doing some research on the fly. But yeah, wow. Yeah, that'd be a bummer, because you tune in. And now again, Jack was living off the grid at the time. He was staying with some family, still back in LA, which is funny because at the end of season 4, you see him walking down the railroad tracks to Mexico as the sun is coming up. And then there was an interstitial video where it's the year in between, and he's living in Chicago on the street, and Chloe meets up with him and stuff. But then now he's back in LA, which doesn't ever really make a lot of sense.
Wasn't he off the grid because people thought he died?
Yeah, he faked his death because he was guilty of a crime in the Chinese consulate, or at least it was being pinned on him. And the Chinese don't actually catch up with him, but I mean that actually happens at the end of this season. So, but yeah, that was a shocker. But yeah, I can't imagine. That's a good tidbit. I can't imagine tuning into that, because again, everybody then gets the news after the fact. Like at CTU, they get the news, and then Jack at that time, Jack was working. He was a day laborer at like a mine or something, and he was like, well, I didn't have work for this, so he's watching the morning news, and he's watching that. So I don't know if that was 15 minutes in, but it's probably pretty close. But yeah, boy, that would be a real bummer. So all right, day worst. We're back into day 6. And this is Jack. Let's see here. 5, he ends 15. 6, they bring him back from China because he's a bargaining chip. This photo, this photo doesn't necessarily match up, but it does say here for many viewers, season 6 and 7 had the weakest episodes of the series, because again, it was an innovative concept at first. Everything's happening right now, but every season had a mole within CTU who was pulling the strings and screwing things up. And almost every season, midpoint, they did a heel turn and said, well, the villain is an X. The villain is this otherwise unseen thing. Every season did that. And it just got less, kind of impactful as time went by. So, okay. All right. So this makes more, this doesn't match up with the photo, but in this episode, it's really frustrating because Audrey, who was Jack's great love in season 4, and then when he returned in season 5, they spent the season together, and he saved her life again from Peter Weller, and we had the ultimate buddy cop moment because they smooch and they say everything's going to be okay now, and then he gets kidnapped by the Chinese. He gets disappeared by the Chinese, and he's on a slow boat to China. That was the last shot of that season, which was like, oh my god. But in this, what had happened in the time in between, so we come back for season 6. Wayne Palmer, the brother, is now president because someone had talked, Powers Booth had talked him into it, or somebody, because Powers Booth is his VP who ends up being the
Right.
president at the end of this, because nobody survives being president on this show. But
Yeah.
Audrey, in the year and a half in between 5 and 6, had, in defiance of her father, who was actor William Devane, he was the Secretary of Defense, in defiance of him, ran off to China to try to find Jack. And the Chinese got their hands on her. She ended up in a torture camp herself, and they kept her. And so by hooker, I don't remember 100% the exact details, but she gets returned here and she's catatonic, but still some kind of trigger helps her help out at some point, like point to something, and she's like points to something on a page, and it helps move the story forward. So it was very like, you and I were watching on one of the YouTube channels that we like, the My So-Called Gen X Life is the channel, about ridiculous soap opera plot lines from the 80s and 90s. And by the time, like they said it, by the time you get to episode 6 or season 6, 7, and 8, that's all it is. It's
Yeah.
just it's ridiculous. How can we continue to move it forward, and all that kind of good stuff. So,
How's
and
it possible that all of this happens in a 24-hour period?
right, exactly. Or how easy it is to fake a death. Just like my most
Yeah.
favorite, and we see it plenty of times in this show. My most favorite is when somebody's hooked up to an IV and they just pull it out and just walk away. Which, if anybody's
Yes.
ever been in a hospital, you don't just, when the nurse goes to take your IV out when you're going to leave, they don't just go bloop because you'd be shooting blood everywhere. It's TV. All right, best day. This goes back to Greg Eitzen as President Logan. He's a jerk right now, but we don't necessarily think that he's a bad guy per se. But this is day 5, episode 6 a.m. To 7 a.m. So this is the very excuse me, this is that last episode that I was just referring to. So I kind of stumbled upon it. But it was, 24 was very much, it didn't even follow an even odd, because like season 1 was great, season 2 was great, season 3 not so much. That was another virus one. And then season 4 was pretty strong. This was pretty strong. But yeah, we find out in this episode, because Jack is they find out not too long prior to this that everything that's going on, the assassination of David Palmer, which we already talked about, was orchestrated by a shady cabal, who we found out in the next season, who one of the members of the shady cabal is in relation to Jack. I don't know if that comes up later in this, so I don't want to give it away. That they're pulling all the strings, and they manage to make him believe that for the sake of oil in the middle, I think it's oil in Russia or something, they need to do this thing or that thing, whatever it is. So anyway, that's all related. And then Jack is trying to make sure that he incriminates himself by putting like a recording device in a pen or something or whatever it is. And he finally gets him. And the final scene of this episode of the season is that they're wheeling David Palmer's casket into, a C-130 to fly it back to Washington. And at the very last moment, Jack has, with the help of the First Lady, who was played by the fantastic Jean Smart, she was literally willy-nilly, and how they ended up wrapping up her character was really bad, I thought. But it doesn't happen in this season. But they managed to get the goods on him. Jack secures it, and I already spoiled this one because he was talking to Aubrey. They have that, like, the classic buddy cop moment where they hug and kiss, and then an agent, some dude, walks out and said, "Oh, Jack Bauer, you've got a phone call from your daughter. It's on a payphone inside this door. Why don't you come on here alone?" And he picks up the phone, and then a bunch of guys grab him, and he gets drugged, and then he wakes up on, as I said, in a dark space, and the villainous Shang-Chi, who is the Chinese agent from the previous season that he faked his death to escape, has now captured him. They're on a cargo ship. They're presumably headed back to China, and that's the end of the season. That was, as I already, like I said, I spoiled myself. I was like, whoa! But it was a great twist, because it kind of came out of nowhere, right? I mean, that's when the show was really very much at its best, is when it kind of swings out of nowhere and does that to you. So
Yes.
I think that was one, with the exception of what I think is the best ending of the series, which I just get the feeling is going to be our number one moment. I think this might have been the best twist. What do you think?
It was very clever. Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Absolutely correct. All right, worst moment. We're back in season 6. And we have, let's see here. Yeah, I think they don't necessarily illustrate in exactly what makes this so bad. Let's see here. But season 6, 12 to 1 a.m. Oh, gotcha. Say Jack is undone by bureaucracy, allowing the Chinese to end up with a critical circuit board. Because again, enough of it is nuclear control rods, or it's this chip that's got to be like, it gets more granular as time goes by. I feel like, well, we've done a virus and we've done an assassination and we've done so now we have to have circuit boards or thumb drives or Google documents or face
Yes.
recognition, something. It's got dumber and dumber. So yeah, Jack is trying to, I think, yeah, let's see what happens here in this. So, the story is choppier than usual. And then, oh yeah, Chloe is always really mean. And her husband, she started out as his estranged husband. Then they got back together and had a kid. And she's always just kind of really nasty to him in general. But they're not really being very specific about what the moment is here. I don't know. This
Yeah.
doesn't help. But yeah, I think
Maybe
it
it's
really,
just because Chloe's really annoying.
yeah, and mean,
Yeah.
and mean. All
Yeah,
right,
and
now,
mean.
yeah, this one
Oh,
really hits
that's
the
their
nail on.
kids.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, exactly. It's your fault. This next one really hits the nail on the head, and it's pun intended if you're looking at the photograph here. So,
Yeah.
in the first 3 seasons, one of the stuffiest of the stuffed shirts at CTU above where Jack was a guy named Ryan Chappelle. Paul Schultze was the actor's name. I'm just remembering it off the top of my head. But he's one of those, like, it's like, think of any jackass boss you've ever had. And like, man, I'd like to take him out behind the woodshed. Well, Jack is put in a position where this was a virus episode. So there was a deadly, a contagious virus that would kill someone within 24 hours, like almost 100. I think it was definitely 100% mortality. And the
Yes,
guy,
a much worse pandemic than we dealt with.
exactly, yeah. And then it's one of these,
Yeah.
you get you bleeding from the eyes and you're
Yes.
spitting up pink goo, and it's really bad. But the guy running this virus, as we later find out, was an old cohort of Jack's who Jack thought was dead and had a grudge against Jack because thought Jack left him behind on this mission. Says, well, you will follow my instructions or I'll release the virus here or there. And one of his instructions, and we find out it's because Ryan Chappelle was like investigating a thread that was going to lead them to what it turns out the real piece of leverage they get, which is they find this dude's daughter and then they're able to leverage her to trap him. But they say Ryan Chappelle has to be dead by 7 a.m. or I'm going to release the virus. So Jack, they try, but they get right down to the deadline, and Jack has to literally take him to the train yard and get him. He says, Ryan, we have to be in position in case this last thing that we're doing doesn't work. We have to be ready to follow through with this. And Jack, first Ryan says, all right, well, I'm gonna do it myself. And he holds a gun up to his head, which is the picture in our article here. He can't do it. So Jack says, get on your knees, face away from me. I'm so sorry. And he shoots him in the back of the head. He has to kill him because that's the only way. But holy cow. I mean, that's some really, really powerful stuff. So right up there with the beginning of an episode with David Palmer's assassination, this ending with a character that nobody liked anyway, but still,
Right.
I mean, it's horrible. I mean, it underscores certainly what played out a lot better early in the series, which was the impossible situation. You got to make bad choices, and this is the result of it. You know what I mean? So I definitely thought that this played very well. So yeah.
Hey, Secret Friends Unite, let me tell you about Zencaster. We use them for our show, and now they're supporting us. Zencaster is now the all-in-one solution making podcasting easy. It's the ultimate web-based podcasting solution. Provides high-quality audio and video podcast production and hosting. With a full suite of professional tools, podcasters can seamlessly record, produce, and publish studio-quality content, all from one dashboard. Being a creator has never been easier. And we chose Zencaster because of the ease of use, high quality output, and it makes it super easy for our guests to come on. We had multiple solutions we tried before, and Zencaster has just been the best fit for us. Why Zencaster? It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencaster. Log in using your browser and start recording a high-quality podcast right away. Record studio-quality sounds and up to 4K video with your guests. Feel a sense of zen knowing Zencaster's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. Have you ever worried what you sound like? Zencaster's post-production process makes you sound buttery smooth. It automatically removes those ums and ahs in your recording. It removes those awkward pauses in conversation too. Set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with the click of a button. So if you're interested in making an easy, high-quality podcast just with the click of a browser button, go to Zencaster.com/pricing and use my code SFU1. You'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. Now back to the show.
Well, in the early seasons, it was an impossible situation and Kim getting into some random trouble because
Kim is his daughter, which I don't think we talk much about her, but yeah. In the first season, it was, she got kidnapped as leverage, and then she got kidnapped again as more leverage with her mom along with her. And then in season 2, she was an au pair, but the guy was a nutcase. The guy was wasn't he the dad from Twilight, actor Billy Burke?
Yes.
Yeah. And then she had to escape him, but then she had to also escape from a police car, which crippled her boyfriend. And then she gets trapped in a cougar trap, and a cougar walks up on her. But then by the time the commercial rolls around, the cougar has just wandered off. It was that was
so ridiculous.
I know, that was when you really started to see the first cracks in the format.
Her worst 24 hours.
Exactly. Yeah, not living your best life. Well, speaking of bad 24 hours, very late. So this was our last regular season because season 9 was is not considered a season of the show because it was the only 12 episodes, but it was in London. And then the last episode was a time skip, but it's not considered part of the regular show, apparently. So I think in some circles they consider season 8 the last season. So this is day 8, episode 12 a.m. to 1 a.m. Katie Sackhoff, who is a wonderful actress. I'm a big fan of her podcast, the Sackhoff Show. I listen to it. She does great interviews with, not that I'm trying to plug another podcast, but I just really enjoy her work. I loved her in Battlestar Galactica. She played Kara Thrace, Starbuck. Peter and I, in this very program that you're listening to, covered that show. She is, of course, Bo-Katan in Star Wars, both animated and live action. She's really great. However, this season aired not long after Battlestar ended, so that was in 2009. This might have been 2009 or 2010. She came on board as an agent who had a backstory that made it sound like she kind of came up from nothing, but she was also marrying Freddie Prinze Jr., who was the lead agent. It took place in New York City. He was the lead agent. They were planning their wedding. Her old either boyfriend or husband, who she left, who is a redneck who wants to, get a quick score or whatever, shows up, tortures her, blah, blah, blah. I think Freddie Prinze Jr. eventually shows up and liberates her, but it turns out by the end of the twists and turns, she is the mole at CTU. She's working for the big bad guy. And it's just, we're going right down the same road. It just goes right down the tube. It says the entire conflict with loser ex-boyfriend was just very frustrating tangent that was just very par for the course. It was very much.
It didn't really make sense.
Yeah.
It didn't fit.
It was like they were trying to just burn up time. And of course, we talk about the fact that every season of this has 24 episodes. And that was standard back in the early 2000s and going back to the 90s and in the 80s before it. Most shows like this, like all the classic Star Trek shows, had 26 episodes. So you're going to have some good and some that were bad. But with this, you had quote unquote one story or two stories that split into two halves and drove a single narrative. So they had to sneak in a lot of sub stories here to just kind of run the clock out, quite literally, as opposed to, it seems like in the writer's room, it was like, well, we got to have something to fill up the B story of this episode that can go away or be resolved or be tossed out 2 episodes down the line or whatever it is, and this was definitely one of them. So, no surprises here. You're like, oh boy, yeah, okay, somebody else is a mole again. They're trying to have like a Nina Myers was the big one in seasons. She was seasons 1 through 3 that she was like, oh, she's the absolute worst. But she was also working for Will Patton. Where at this point, yeah, this was the Russians again or something. I don't know. So yeah, it was just 24. Just it was diminishing returns, and by the time you're in the last season, it was hard to think of a moment that even when we were watching, I wasn't looking at my phone because I'm like, well, let's just pick up the pace. It was very boring.
Right.
So now we get to our number one moment, and this to me, and anyone is welcome to dispute me about this if you can think of a moment that was more telling than this. This was one of the more shocking moments I've ever seen in scripted television. So this is the last episode of season 1. Jack has been fighting to save his wife and daughter this entire 24-hour period. He found out that an arch villain that he thought he killed, played by Dennis Hopper, was alive, and his 2 sons were orchestrating everything. His one son, who he didn't get much screen time, was Misha Collins, who was big on Supernatural. And Dennis Hopper is, of course, Dennis Hopper. In this final episode, Jack tracks the bad guys down. They're getting on a boat in the port of Los Angeles, and they're going to get away. And then it was revealed at the end of the previous episode that Nina Myers, who I already mentioned, who was Jack's confidant and sometimes lover when he and his wife were going through a separation, is the mole, the very first mole that we have to actually give a shit about. And she gives Jack a fake phone call, says, they found your daughter's, Kim. They found Kim's body in the water. The Coast Guard called in. She's dead. I'm so sorry. You should come back here. He hangs up, and you just see him. He has one of his Jack Bauer kind of ugly crying moments, which they do several times in the series. Very impactful. And the music swells. And then he just goes, ooh, he goes back to his car. He grabs like 9 guns. He's got the 2-gun thing. He drives, and there's like 10 bad guys in there. He drives in there as a distraction. He's got his gun. He kills all 10 of them in the run and gun and out on the dock. And the one son is the last one to fall. And he's finally face to face with Dennis Hopper, and it was guns. And Dennis Hopper's gun goes click, click, click. And we get this. Dennis Hopper tosses his gun and holds his hands up. And you get this long, probably 10 seconds where you don't know what he's going to do, and then Jack just unloads into him, and Dennis Hopper's dead body falls into the water. And it was funny, the boat that was coming to pick him up went, nope, just takes off. We're good.
Yeah.
But Nina now knows she's got to make her escape because she's been outed by Jack because he's on his way back in, and he calls and says, Nina's the mole, grab her. And so Nina disappears. She's in the bowels of the building, and she's talking to somebody in German, like, hey, they go to the escape plan. There can't be any, no witnesses at all. And then as she turns around, there's Jack's wife. Oh, I was looking for such and such and this and that. And Nina pulls out her gun, ties Terry up, the wife up, and then it goes blank. And then you see Nina escaping. Jack catches her in the parking garage, almost puts a bullet in her. But Tony, and we haven't even talked about Xander Berkeley's character, who is George Mason, who is the other like upper level suit that you kind of hate, but eventually turns out to be a good guy. They talk him down out of it. But as Jack wanders back into the building, Kim is safe, doesn't know where his wife is, starts looking around, finds the room where she and Nina were together. Nina had tied her up to a chair and shot her in the chest. She's dead. Absolute heartbreaker. Never that I can remember seeing a moment like that played in that fashion, where here's a guy he survived everything. The day was won. Evil was punished. Some bad guys are dead. The other one is, captured and going to prison. And, I'm sorry. And of course, the soap opera, we did have it, not to admit, we had a couple of soap opera moments earlier in the series. There was one time where Terry had hysterical amnesia because she thought Kim died in a car crash. Then that it's all right. But earlier than that, she finds out that she's pregnant. She tells Jack about that over the phone, right? And it was the last conversation they had. So, it wasn't,
There were multiple times that you thought she was going to not make it. Like, because I thought she was going to end up having a stroke or something.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think she was going to survive that at all in this 24-hour period because they kept making it look like she was going to die before an episode ended.
Right. Well, they,
that's what they were framing it.
Every episode really in the show ends in a little micro cliffhanger because they do the last 30 seconds, maybe more, is this kind of slow count out where it's an image of me, but then like it Brady bunches it where like it moves to the side and then it'll show you, and it'll move you to the opposite corner. And then a third image will show up and a fourth image, and they'll all coalesce for a few seconds. And then it'll go to the countdown clock where it counts down the last like 3 or 4 seconds. That was more often than not, that is how they played it, if not every single episode. But this one really had the punch. I mean, it was, and again, you could give the season like a 9.5 if you divorce out those little stupid moments, and kind of the really obvious stuff. But yeah, I can't remember a time when I had been that shocked and saddened by the end of a show where you have this family. They had just come back together after an estrangement. It looked like they were putting their lives back together, and now everything is shattered. And Jack will never be able to forgive himself, which is where we pick up in season 2. And he very quickly and like I thought season 2 in some ways was almost superior to season 1 because they kind of found their voice, so it was a little more consistent. But again, it still had its dumb moments because we had all the stuff with Kim. It was like they could have sent Kim off to college and she could have just not been there because nothing that she did really helped with the plot line at all. So
you could remove Kim from every episode and the show would still work.
I mean, she was at least in the first half of season 1. Her kidnapping was the thing that kind of drove the plot with that. Yeah. So, that's the list. Any other big 24 moments that come to mind, either best or worst, that really jump out at you?
I mean, it doesn't even bring up any of the plot line really it doesn't go into Kim at all in this list, which I think is weird because I think she was the worst of all of it. But maybe that's me.
Yeah.
She went from being this high schooler to being an au pair to being one of the members of the team. I mean, it was just the Kim, like, obviously it's not just one episode. There are so many episodes, but I hated Kim. I couldn't stand her.
Yeah. I don't know that there was anybody who said, "Oh, Kim's my favorite character," but they had to, they did the classic, kind of thing that they do with all TV shows, which is they've got to, have kids, and when they have a kid in there, it's like, well, the kid's job is to get kidnapped or to, manipulate the adults to do this thing or that thing, whatever it is. So yeah, they did plenty of that. So anyway, so that's Fox's 24. There are a lot of great moments in this show. And maybe for me, it's the member berries. I loved watching it so much. My job, I worked at a company at the time that everybody watched the show, and it was on Monday nights, I think. So it was the quote unquote water cooler talk the next day. Everybody was enjoying it. And it was appointment, it was appointment viewing. But again, it just dissociated over time. It was probably in the end of it, maybe 50-50, like 50% good, 50% pretty weak season wise. But yeah, I liked it. I know for a fact they tried to bring it back starring actor Corey Hawkins, who is one of he was a character in The Walking Dead whose name I'm forgetting. And then he was in the rap movie about NWA. I think he was Dr. Dre. So I always think of him as Dr. Dre. So they brought him back as a more modern day Jack Bauer in the season. I think it was another 12 season episode, but they made it in 24 hours and it was not successful. It was quickly canceled. And there's been talk ever since, hey, how can we bring it back? Blah, blah, blah. Kiefer went on to be this is what I love. Kiefer went on to be in Designated Survivor, which you and I have been watching recently. And there were two full seasons of that on a network, and then Netflix picked up the last season, and we watched all of season 1. We started season 2, and how many times do you hear me say, well, they did that on 24? That's plot line from 24.
Multiple times. Yes,
because and I'm like, well, if this was a conversation between the president, which is what happens in that show, is that Kiefer's character becomes president because the Capitol building gets blown up and he's a designated survivor during the State of the Union. But I'm like, he's president. If he was having an argument with this guy, Jack Bauer would pick this guy up and throw him out of a window. And I just, maybe that's what they do in the last episode. So we could be Yeah, it could be motivated to watch the rest of it. But yeah, that's it. So anyway, Fox is 24 as of last look. You can find it on Amazon Prime. But again, the website in particular, I should put this in the show notes for every time I do this, is justwatch.tv. You can type in the name of the show. It'll tell you where you should be able to stream it, but it's definitely also video on demand or even available on disc if you're a disc kind of person. But anyway, that's the show. Patreons, thanks for joining. If you're listening to this on our free feed in the future, you can visit patreon.com/Secret Friends Unite. Get to try us out for 7 days for free and stay on board for as little as $2 a month. So that's a lot of entertainment for $2 a month to hear us talk about fun stuff like this. But we will see you next time. Patrons, thank you, and keep watching TV.
This podcast is part of the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and podcast services around the galaxy, as well as video on our YouTube channel. You can support Secret Friends Unite by becoming a Patreon member, get bonus programs and more over at patreon.com/secretfriendsunite. Join our Discord community for even more discussions on all things geek. For all the latest updates on Secret Friends Unite, make sure to follow us on Threads at secret.friends.unite and visit secretfriendsunite.com. Find our merchandise at TeePublic and Redbubble. Thanks for listening, and may the Force live long and prosper.